All right, week 7 is here and quarterback play is heating up. Some guys are red hot, others are cooling off, and a few are still figuring it out. And whether you're rolling with a superstar or streaming for upside, here's your top 20 quarterbacks for week 7. What's up, Headliner Nation? My name is Brad, the Rankings King. And before we dive into this week's rankings, just a reminder that these are the consensus rankings between Jake and Kyle. And for more detailed analysis, make sure to check out the start-sit videos from Kyle already posted on the channel this week. And if you want even more breakdowns each week, join the Fantasy Headliners community by tapping that join button below. That's going to get you access to extra rankings like flex, kicker, defense, and an exclusive spot inside of our Discord. Now, before we get to the week 7 rankings, we've got a few hits and misses from week 6. Our first hit was Drake May, and we love the potential for multiple touchdown passes in week 6, and we had him ranked inside of the top 7 quarterbacks on the week, and he killed it at QB2. And then what about Dak Prescott? He continues to perform without CeeDee Lamb no matter the matchup. We had him inside of the top 10, and he finished at QB6. Our next hit is Caleb Williams, and he really continues to be an above-average fantasy quarterback. We had him at QB11, and he finished at QB10. Okay, so there's our hits, and what about our misses? And we start with Justin Fields. Coming into week 6, Fields had 3 games with over 25 fantasy points. Week 6, looks like he touched a football for the first time in his life. Next up was Jackson Dart, and listen, he had a tough matchup on Thursday Night Football, but he once again ran for over 50 yards and had a rushing touchdown. So even though he was in our top 20, we had him too low. Our next miss is Bryce Young, and listen, no one on earth trusts Bryce to start him in fantasy, but he finished top 12, and we didn't even have him in the top 20 at all. Okay, so that's it for your hits and misses in week 6. Let's turn the page to week 7. In tier 1, we've got Patrick Mahomes, Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, Dak Prescott, Baker Mayfield, and Jalen Hurts. Topping the list at number 1, we've got Patrick Mahomes, and Mahomes is the current QB1 overall in fantasy, and he's about to get his number 1 wide receiver back. Plus, it's always fun to see Mahomes go against Max Crosby, and it forces him to really try and stick it to the Raiders. At number 2, we've got Jaden Daniels, and no Terry and Debo less than 100%, but it was still no problem for Daniels in week 6. The rushing upside was there, and he threw for 3 touchdowns last week. Now he gets #blessed with a Dallas matchup because no team allows more fantasy points per game to quarterbacks than Dallas. At number 3, we've got Caleb Williams, and listen, it may not always be pretty on the field, but it leads to fantasy points, and here on this channel, that's all we care about. He's the current QB12 on the year, and New Orleans allows over 21 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. And at number 4, we've got Dak Prescott, and Dak has been one of the hottest QBs in the league last month, and he did it all without CeeDee Lamb. He now has 13 total touchdowns in 6 weeks, and there's a chance that CeeDee comes back this week against Washington, who allows 19 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. At number 5, we've got Baker Mayfield going into Detroit, and Baker keeps losing weapons, and he keeps putting up numbers and leading his team to wins. No Ibuka, no Godwin, no Bucky, and maybe no Evans, but at this point, he's our MVP on the year, and the Detroit defense is really banged up right now. And then at number 6, we've got Jalen Hurts going into Minnesota, and Hurts can't seem to get the rushing and passing going at the same time. He's had 280 plus pass yards in each of the last 2 games, but only 16 yards rushing in those 2 games. Minnesota has been tough against QBs, and Philly just seems off. All right, before we jump into the next tier, I want to make sure that you're all hooked up on Underdog. You already know that we're crushing those player pick'ems on Underdog this year, so what are you waiting for? Head over to Underdog Fantasy or download the app. Create a new account and use the referral code HEADLINERS when you do so. Then just make an initial deposit and come join a contest. If you sign up with that promo code, again, it's HEADLINERS, you'll get access to all the promos Underdog offers weekly. Check this out. Once you play your first $5, they're going to give you a $100 bonus. Bonus funds. Come on, play $5, get $100. It's that easy. And don't forget, Jake is also going to be breaking down the best picks weekly on our show on Fridays. So links to join are in the description, and we look forward to playing with you on Underdog this week. Let's get into tier 2. We've got Drake May, Justin Herbert, Jared Goff, Daniel Jones, Matthew Stafford, Jackson Dart, Trevor Lawrence, and Jordan Love. At number 7, we've got Drake May, and he's the current QB6 on the season, and he's doing it every week with different weapons. He's not relying on one guy, and that makes him dangerous every week. Tennessee is tough on quarterbacks, so we may need some of that rushing upside this week. At number 8, we've got Justin Herbert, and he just had his first game since week 2 with multiple touchdown passes, and he didn't even have Quentin Johnston. Johnston is questionable again, and Indy is a middle of the pack defense, so a low-end QB1 could be there with him in week 7. At number 9, we've got Jared Goff, and he continues to be more safe than ceiling each week. He has 14 touchdowns in 6 games, though, and in a game against Tampa and their banged-up defense, we could be in line for another multiple touchdown game from Jared Goff. At number 10, we've got Daniel Jones, and we saw the return of the Daniel Jones ceiling with a rushing touchdown in week 6 in a great matchup against Arizona. It'll be a tougher matchup this week against the Chargers, but this offense is healthy, and not many teams can say that. At number 11, we've got Matthew Stafford going to Jacksonville, and what is Stafford without Puka? He did just have his worst game of the year last week against Baltimore, but the weather conditions were not perfect. And still, there's a slight concern, but Jacksonville allows the 8th most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks, so we've got Matthew Stafford here in tier 2. At number 12, we've got Jackson Dart going to Denver, and it's really hard to know what to do with Dart this week. He isn't racking up fantasy points in the pass game, but he has 50-plus rush yards in each of his 3 starts this year, and that's a big boost. This will be his toughest test of the year, though, and so we'll see what he can do against the Broncos. At number 13, we've got Trevor Lawrence, and he really improved over the last 2 weeks. He's scored 19-plus fantasy points in back-to-back games, and he's finally starting to figure it out with Brian Thomas Jr. Now, this matchup with LA will be tougher than what he's seen in the last 2 weeks, and so we have him solidly here in tier 2. At number 14, we've got Jordan Love going to Arizona, and Josh Jacobs has been running wild, which means we haven't really needed much from Jordan Love each week, and that's kind of the worry this week. Do they need Love to throw like crazy to beat Arizona? Probably not, and so he is more safe than ceiling in week 7. Okay, so that's it for tier 2. Let's turn the page to tier 3. We've got CJ Stroud, Sam Darnold, Bo Nix, Aaron Rodgers, Brock Purdy, and Joe Flacco. At number 15, we've got CJ Stroud, and he's coming off the bye, and he's been better his last 2 games. He has 6 touchdowns in those 2 games, and he's averaging around 25 yards rushing. We're hoping the injuries to Seattle's secondary is enough to give Stroud another solid game in week 7. At 16, we've got Sam Darnold, and he's been one of the most consistent quarterbacks in the last 5 weeks. He has multiple touchdowns in 4 of the last 5, and with JSN, he is racking up yards in chunks. This is going to be a tough one, though, because no team allows fewer fantasy points per game to quarterbacks than the Houston Texans. At number 17, we've got Bo Nix, and does he have too many weapons to choose from? He's spending so much time trying to find the best one. Dude has like FOBO, fear of a better option, and so is only 1 game with over 250 yards passing and only 9 passing touchdowns. Now he'll have to worry about that strong Giants pass rush. All right, at number 18, we've got Aaron Rodgers, and finally, Rodgers gets a good matchup. Going against Cincy is a great time for him to air it out a little bit more, and he may not have the highest ceiling because I'm sure that they run a lot, but Cincinnati allows over 19 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. And then at number 19, we've got Brock Purdy. There's a good chance at a return this week, but this Atlanta defense is playing so well, it will be no easy task, especially if he's once again without some of his offensive weapons. Kittle is back, but Pearsall is still iffy, and so not really an easy return this week. And then rounding out the top 20, we've got old man Joe Flacco. He was only in Cincinnati a few days, and he threw for 220 yards and 2 touchdowns on 45 attempts. And listen, the run game, it's absolutely cooked, and his pass-catching weapons, he's probably going to be playing from behind and chucking it again. Plus, Pittsburgh, they also allow 20 fantasy points per game to the quarterback position. Okay, so there you go. There's your tiers 1, 2, and 3. Your top 20. There's a few guys on the outside looking in. We've got Justin Fields, Bryce Young, Tua Tagovailoa, Michael Penix, and Spencer Rattler. And that's a wrap on week 7 quarterback rankings. Consistency, upside, and matchups all matter this week. So play smart, manage risk, and keep stacking those wins. Be sure to like and subscribe this video and check out the channel for the rest of our rankings and full weekly breakdowns. Let's go.
Analytics off the chain, all the channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game.